Hello, everyone. My name is Nyokabi Karaoke, and I am part of Found Sound Nation. We design and produce the OneBeat program in partnership with Bang on a Can and the U.S. Department of State. And OneBeat is a global music exchange program that brings artists and leaders from around the world together in one space for collaborative creation and the incubation of projects that use music to make a positive impact in the world. I'm super excited for this first OneBeat Podcast Collider, which we are having in order to celebrate the release of episode 2 of our brand new OneBeat podcast. And in the second episode, I had the pleasure of interviewing Justin Harrington, aka Demeanor, who is an alumnus of our OneBeat program and who I'd say is one of the most purposeful artists that I know. And he's joined by some other brilliant minds in this panel to discuss folk music and the collective voice. And just before I hand it over to Kokayi to introduce everyone and to get the conversation started, a few housekeeping notes. At the end of this discussion, we'll be hosting a short Q&A. So please write any questions, insights for the panelists that you have in the chat, and please be respectful. We'll also share links to these artists in the chat at the end of the discussion, including a link to the OneBeat program if you'd like to know more. And also, please check out the OneBeat podcast on whichever streaming platform that you use. The Justin episode is already out, and the next episode that we're releasing next month, it will feature percussionist Daniela Serna, who is a Colombian percussionist, and she's going to be talking to us about the power of femininity and the drum. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce Kokayi.
Peace. Thank you, Kabi. Thank you so much for the introduction. We're here once again, like Kabi stated, to celebrate the second episode of the OneBeat podcast, featuring Justin Harrington, aka Demeanor, which I'm going to refer to you as Demeanor from henceforth. Want to give a quick shout out to everyone who's tuned in. Shout outs to Found Sound Nation, OneBeat, and North Carolina Folk Fest for giving us the love and the platform, the opportunity to speak. I want to do some quick introductions, aka first up is Demeanor. Demeanor is an artist, a folk artist from North Carolina-based folk artist who states that, rap music is folk music, which I absolutely love, and we're going to get into that. We have Grammy-nominated vocal music educator Jordan Lee, who's also rocking the yellow, because that's how we do. And last but not least is North Carolina Arts Council Senior Program Director Carly Jones, who is an amazing individual unto herself. But here's what I would like to do. Carly, could you introduce yourself to the people?
Oh, sure. Yeah. My name is Carly Jones, and I work for the North Carolina Arts Council. I head the artists and organizations team. So basically what we do at the North Carolina Arts Council is we distribute funding from the state of North Carolina and from the National Endowment for the Arts across the state of North Carolina to communities all over. So that's all your arts organizations, that's your festivals, that's your individual artists. So that is primarily what I do. And then we also, of course, do arts education and such, funding for arts education. And we have the oldest and most supported state folk life and folk music program in the entire country. So we're all about getting money into people's hands. So that is who I work for. And I also am a performing artist myself when I'm not doing this. So that is what I do. Yeah.
No, thank you. Sure. Jordan, please introduce yourself to the folks.
Hey, everybody. I'm Jordan Lee. I'm a modern music educator in Greensboro, North Carolina. I help cultivate honest and open-minded people through making music. It was choir before, and now looks like music production. So I'm working on a in-class level as a practitioner, but on a county level, connecting with another nonprofit I work for called Notes for Notes, which puts modern, state-of-the-art music recording studios into boys and girls clubs across the country. So they're doing their first venture inside Guilford County in their public school system. So it's very cool. Get to head up that project. And in my other time, I'm a community organizer, restorative social justice leader by building mass choirs to give praise to just community. And my festival, A Celebration of Black Excellence, had its 4th year. So that is what I do. I'm also an artist as well. And yeah, a little bit about me.
Dope. Thank you. And last but not least, Demeanor.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, my name is Justin Harrington. Professionally, I go by Demeanor. I'm an artist born and raised in Greensboro, North Carolina, and I've recently co-founded an arts nonprofit by the name of House of Blacks, and we're just over here fighting for equity within the Black and Brown arts communities. And it's such a pleasure to be here, and I'm really looking forward to what we're about to get into.
Thank you. So yeah, let's get into it. First of all, what does folk music mean to you all? And whoever wants to field that first, go for it.
Yeah, for sure. I'd love to jump in here. I think folk music, personally had a big role in shaping my identity as a man and as a Black man. It's tough where I'm from, and fighting just against systematic problems in my area. It was tough for me, especially being like a light-skinned Black man. It was just tough for me to figure out my place, and I came from like an acting background, a theater background. So I felt like I was always kind of shifting from world to world, and I didn't really have a place to fit in. But my aunt was in a band called the Carolina Chocolate Drops and another band called Sankofa Strings a long time ago. And I used to travel with her to different folk festivals and old time festivals. Really is what I came into this community, this world, identifying it as old time music before I even thought of the word folk. And so it just it taught me the legacy of Black traditional American music and the way that it got here and where it's gone since it's gotten here. And so folk music to me just means the voices and truths of all people. And my specific experience is just with Black American folk music.
Carly?
Yeah, when I hear folk music, I think of the music of the people. That's what I think of folk music. Folk music there's a wide range of folk music. And here in North Carolina, which, I was born and raised in North Carolina, so I'm going to rep it till I die. But we have a rich heritage when it comes to folk music, from the mountains to the sea, as we say here. So a lot of folks know, about Etta Baker and Libba Cotton and Joan Odell Thompson and folks like that. But we also have, folk music still being created to this day, right? So, I think it's really important. I think sometimes people think of folk music and they think history, which is so important for us to remember our history and to, really celebrate those pioneers. What Demeanor was talking about with, some of our Black creators that are oftentimes not given what they are due when it comes to how they started in folk music and how we're still riffing off of what they've done. But also the millennials and zillennials or whoever who are creating music to this day, like Demeanor, right? And still like creating their own folk music. So I look at folk music, there's a lot of protest music in there, Nina Simone, a daughter of North Carolina here, she was a folk artist. I don't think a lot of people think of her as a folk artist, but I think that folk music is the voice of the people. It's what is passed down from generation to generation. And it's that grassroots music, right? It's what tells the story of a people. So that's what I think about when I think about folk music.
Well, speaking about history, Jordan, as an educator, right? What do you think is the significance of recognizing Black American folk music within the lexicon of educational systems and curriculum and music language?
It's extremely necessary, and that's what I was going to lead to. What folk music was for me. As Demeanor was saying, and Carly was saying, like, we have our different lenses and walks of life that get us to where we are. And for me, I grew up with 2 blind parents, oldest of 5, grew up in a lot of different situations that checked off a lot of boxes of adversity, but I grew up in Chapel Hill. So I, had a weird perception of what my life should be as a Black person. And as I moved throughout my education and built myself as an educator, my direct role was always reaching forward instead of like thinking about reaching back and forward was to youth. And I've made a dedicated effort to kind of establish that youth are folk as well. And, you know, the concept of folk really, to me, is so different and new in a way, because that wasn't my language over the last year. But the more, you know, I've been immersed in these communities, that's everything that I believe and breathe. I'm all about figuring out what those intersections are and helping people bring those to life through music creation. So that the history of who someone is plays a big role, but I also do believe that it's so important to know where that starting point is for someone.
That's beautiful. So do you look, Demeanor, do you look at the artist as a griot in telling stories, right? Historical stories and current stories. And in that, how do you, try to elicit from the people support to amplify, uplift the work that you're doing, or those that are actually doing this work?
Well, yeah, I think oftentimes artists are unknowingly griots themselves. I think that when I think of a griot, I think of someone who has inherited the responsibility of learning the lineage, learning the stories, and then activating and passing this on, you know. And I think a lot of artists are unknowing of this. You know, it's something that comes very naturally. And I think that art is just the language with which we communicate our feeling, are the things that words can't describe, you know. No matter how incredible our lyrics are, you know, it's the whole scope of every piece of the art that we put into it that gives the context to the story as well as the specifics of the story. So I think that in a lot of artists, especially younger folk artists, you know, because a lot of people don't necessarily have the language to know that what they're doing is folk music, or does it even matter what we call it? You know, the music of the people exists because the people exist, you know. And so when it comes to amplifying and uplifting, I think that sometimes we have to take more of a responsibility as the listeners. We're all our own tellers. We're all our own voices. We're, you know, especially when you have what I think is like bravery to be an artist. It's hard to be vulnerable. It's hard to tell your story, you know. But as listeners, I think we have more of a responsibility because we have been conditioned in, you know, this new world that we're living in to receive a lot of things for free, to stream things, to where ownership doesn't mean something completely different now. Nothing is tangible. I think we have more of a responsibility to amplify the people who are being honest rather than just acknowledging the people who are being honest, you know. I could go in a little bit longer on this.
What I'm saying is, I understand that, and that's dope. I'm just wondering, like, so how do people support that, right? How do people, institutions, and educators? So this way we can pass this around to everybody. How do institutions support those that are doing the work and telling the stories, right? How do we keep ourselves from defining ourselves through the lens of, whiteness and oppressors, right? Into defining what we are as artists or who we are as artists, even giving folk a categorization, right? If we're talking about music of protest and music of upliftment and music of self-help, how do we, what are the roles of institutions and community and education in supporting that work? And anybody can take that.
Well, since I work for an institution, I'll dive in here. So, working for the government, but working for an arts agency within the government is a really interesting place because, we're out here trying to support the people, support the storytelling, and make sure that North Carolina is a place that artists can live and work, right? And sometimes it is hard to really make those connections in communities that may not always trust the government for good, for historical reasons. And so it's about community building. It's about listening first. I think institutions need that's the first step in equity work, right? Is you can't just go in and say, you know what, little town, I think you need a concert like this. No, you go in, you meet the people, you see what already exists there, and you support the music making and what is being created through state funding, because state funding is taxpayer dollars, right? So it belongs to everybody. So that funding should be distributed across the state of North Carolina, no matter what artistic lens is looking over it, right? We've got to let go of these notions, these categories, these notions of what is art, what is music. It is what speaks to the soul. It is what tells the story of a people. We also have we have the most, we have a huge indigenous population here and so many tribes across the state of North Carolina. Their music is music that has been here for generations, right? And should be supported by the state of North Carolina, by this institution. So I think that the first part is listening. And then the second part, I worked on a campaign called Come Here and See, HEAR. It's a play on words, but it was a celebration of North Carolina's rich musical history. And we did quite a few different campaigns that were multimedia campaigns that, it took me bringing in folks that we had not worked with before and asking them. We had this one series through Come Here and See called In the Water. It was like, we kind of said like, oh, it's almost like it's in the water. Everyone's connected. And we asked artists, where in North Carolina is really special to you? And we would love to bring our videography team. You do your own thing. You choose the music and tell a story. Tell your story as to why this space is important to you and why this music and your culture is important to you. And then we broadcast that all over the state of North Carolina, because it's about, we have to change what people think about when they think about folk music. Particularly in North Carolina, people have a very specific image in their mind, and we have to break those walls down. So that it's a twofold. It's listening and then supporting the work that's already there.
Yeah,
100%. I agree. And like with an educator lens, it's a direct transfer. I think that is what's missing inside of the work that we need in general. Listening, then responding. I find a lot of situations that I end up in requiring me to relinquish control and not be a gatekeeper and allow people to create in the ways that are natural for them. And what I mean by people is youth or adults, because, we hit adulthood and there's autonomy, there's self-direction. But those same things are the same mindsets that I try to instill in children as well, and getting them to a place where they can create in a way that directly reflects them requires people to get out of the way. It requires people to listen. It requires the educator that's in front of them to also, and this is where I feel like it's twofold in my world, it requires the teacher to also know that they're an artist as well. That was a very new thing for me. Even seeing myself as an artist, but that was because I was approached by open-minded people, including Justin, that helped unlock that. And now, it's what I want to spread. The same with Notes for Notes. They're doing a dedicated effort to be able to provide opportunities for educators to see themselves as the artists that they already are. It's not where teachers are folk, artists are teachers. It's one of those things that it moves together. But that's the chain. And when you said institution earlier, I thought about me in a university and going to a place that suppressed my Blackness, and whether I did it alongside of it because that's what I walked into, that was my situation. So I came out of there with a set of skills that applied to a group of people that didn't look like me. And I found myself in my first job straight up asking the youth in front of me, okay, well, if this isn't working, what do y'all want to do? What makes you happy? And it completely changed everything because they took control. They became the leaders. And that's what led to, the building of folk. And so, yeah, my lens on folk always so far, and the way that I move is about creating masses of people to say one thing or orient themselves in one way, to that point of not having people listening. Okay, well, here's a choir of people. Here are a group of people telling you a thing. Here are a group of people that don't look like you expressing love. So all of those things kind of melt into what I believe that looks like.
And I would say that when we're thinking of like, how do we uplift, how do we amplify, how do we support, I think there's one thing that we can do that lends itself to every avenue, to whether you work for an institution, whether you don't, whether you're attacking institutions, whether you're a freelancer, whether you're a lawyer, whatever it is. What are you leading with? When someone asks you that question, how do you support? What do you lead with? I think when we lead with humanity, it applies across the board. We all have different roles, strategies, accesses, resources. We all have our different means to accomplish blank goal. But if the goal that we all have in common is building a stronger future together, does it matter whether or not when we're having the conversation, I ask myself, does it matter what someone's background is? Does it matter what someone's role is? When you lead, it's hard for me to articulate this. But if I lead with, I am a representative of this institution, right? Or I am a like thing over here. That's removing the humanity, that's removing the reality.
Absolutely.
Right? And so when you lead with humanity, that changes how you maneuver in that space, because the way that I maneuver and the way that I support in arts nonprofit, I'm filming TV shows and doing podcasts, the things that I can offer are going to be different, but we're all going the same place, And I think when we lead with that shared intention, when we lead with and the only shared intention, no matter race, color, creed, whatever, is humanity, and I think that that's how we support, is by leading there, because I think that's where we're failing ourselves as a global community, is because I don't think we're leading with humanity. I think we're first leading with the ways in which we can categorize the various human types, and I think that's doing a big disservice, especially in, like, let's be real, like in a capitalist society that doesn't just have to do with how we orchestrate business. It's how people are defining themselves and measuring their success, their worth, their value as beings on this planet, And I think that if we could lead there, we're going to be able to uplift, amplify, energize, empower all of these things at once,
So you're basically saying that we're leading with transactional relationships, as opposed to leading with, giving and giving giving space, from a giving space, as opposed to leading with your title, right? Or leading with the transaction you're hoping to start. Right.
Yeah,
because that's how you, right. Because it's not I'm leading with, hey, I care about what you're caring about, or leading with empathy, or leading with intention and empathy. It's more so leading with, what are you going to do for me, and what do I have to do for you? What are your deliverables? Right. Because if we broke it down in that language, it would be like, all right, what do you want and what are the deliverables? I need money. You give me the deliverable. Right.
Exactly.
And what kind of conversation is that?
And transactional thought is the assumption that like everything in this life is binary. It's like a 1 or a 0. But like, even when you say giving, like it's a duality, because sharing is both giving and receiving. Like when you give, you're taking something back. Something is like, if I give my heart, something is going to fill this space. And if they're sharing, like, we're doing two things at once. And that, like, you're right. Like, that transactional mentality, I think, is suited to getting a muffin from a coffee shop, not so much living a life of love.
What's funny about that is that I was doing, remember when creative economy was the super buzzword that was going around, right? And I would do these pop-ups at coffee shops. And I would go in and I would buy a bunch of coffee. Like, I would just give the register a certain amount of money in the morning and be like, yo, whoever wants a coffee, spend this much. Whoever wants a muffin, spend this much. And then I'm going to sit over here and make beats. And the coffee shop owner was like, yo, what are you doing? I was like, no, I'm actually participating in the creative economy. Like, I want to make sure that you make money and I can hold space here and create. But I want to make sure, because the free Wi-Fi really ain't free. you know, and you really want people to use, you know, they can use the Wi-Fi, but you want them to buy some coffees and some muffins, right? And so as an artist, not coming here to be given something, but as an artist, I want you to share in my success. I want you to share in my creation of the art, but I also understand and have a deep understanding of the business that you're trying to proliferate and try to propagate and make sure it's here for the community. So as artists, as institutions, as educators, what is our space in that? Where do we see ourselves in the model of undergirding? Because that's the one thing I wanted to talk to you about, Carly, is, you know, I know that, you know, from the institution perspective, yes, come in with ears, yes, come in with an open mind, but yes, come in with your check. So how can people get to that check?
Oh, I love that you asked that question, because that at the end of the day, like, words are just words, right? Like, you know, we understand that, you know, the distribution of funding, and that it's not just in North Carolina, it's a national issue. The distribution of funding historically from our funders has not been equitable. It has been, you know, the folks that are working in arts administration, there's not many people of color in arts administration. And that's one of the things we need to change. But, you know, I think that historically, you know, we look at the arts, there is a very kind of elitist way of looking at the arts that folks in arts administration are really trying to get away from as much as possible. But because of that elitism, there have been barriers that have been put into place historically with many of our funders, and has made it really hard for the everyday folk who are in these communities, the Black and brown folk who are in these communities, to get access to those funds. And so we are in a national conversation about how to change that, how to break down those barriers that have been there for forever. So one barrier sometimes can be the nonprofit model, right? Like, you know, many times you have to have a 501c3 to apply for these funds. The North Carolina Arts Council, we actually are just starting a new grant category called the Arts Equity Project Grant, where you do not have to have a 501c3 of your own. You still have to partner with someone that has a 501c3, but it doesn't have to be, it could be like your local Boys and Girls Club. It could be any kind of community organization. It doesn't have to be a quote unquote arts organization, right? So but it has been, I will say, we released this grant category, and I've been having trouble telling people, like, no, you can apply. You can. Individual artists can apply for this fund, these funds. You know, you don't have to, those barriers that have been there for years. It's almost like folks don't believe me when I say this, because they're so used to hearing no.
Right.
They're so, and I was one of them. I think that's the other thing. We need more artists in arts administration who have been on the other side. You know, I used to be at the helm of the African American Cultural Festival of Raleigh and Wake County, and that was a small nonprofit, and we would have to apply for these grants every year. And you know, I know what it's like to have to do all that paperwork. We don't go to school for grant writing, right? So absolutely. Breaking that down and being like, that's okay. And making an environment that it's okay to ask these questions. And that's where it goes back to Demeanor's point of, you know, authentic relationships is where it starts. It's not transactional. I have to go and travel across North Carolina and meet the people and see the festivals and see the art and see what their audience is like and what their community outreach is like. And I may not say, okay, here's a check that day, but it's about building relationships and seeing, and it's not just about checks. It's also about what folks call professional development, but you know, workshops about how to negotiate, how to apply for a grant, you know, not just us holding the keys, teaching our folks in our communities how to hold the keys, right?
Exactly.
Like,
I think that's the equity. the equity of information, right?
Yes,
I think that's what you're getting at. Also, we can drop that Arts Equity Project grant link in the chat or in the space that this is being broadcast. That'd be great for folks to be able to tap into that grant that you do not need to be a nonprofit to be part of. I think that's another barrier, right? Because I've dealt with fiscal having to go get a fiscal sponsor, without them understanding that as an independent artist, I can absolutely manage a certain amount of money, right? It's not just going to go in my pocket. It has to go through things we got to spend things on. Yeah. But I think that as an institution, as institutions, even as artists, right, we should be educating others that are around us to be able to have similar access to grant funding and opportunities that we have, right? I think go ahead.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No. I would ask that we let Jordan go first.
I just love that every time we speak, and no matter what situation you go in, even if it deviates from my world, you always circle back to education. And that's what it comes down to, like spreading the wealth, and wealth not always equating money. And, for me, Carly, I am a prime example of that. I spent the last 3.5 years marching kind of blindly alone, thinking that I needed to blaze and create this space that, was necessary, and that is necessary. And, had festivals where many children and parents come together, and then the community comes together. And then I'll get on the other side of it and be like, oh my gosh, I wish I had help. And, for the first time this year, I had help. But Devereaux Nash, who helped me build the Akobe Festival this year, our biggest thing was we don't have the knowledge or the resources to know how to get the money that's necessary. But, I'm thankful that we knew how to navigate and network with people, to what you were saying, but that, we're not a nonprofit, but I've been doing this work for 4 years, and it was almost 1,000 people last year. There's people that want to create inside these mindsets, but there's barriers that are in place that, limited me, but we could even dismantle that into like y'all said, our schools don't teach us these things. So where am I supposed to acquire this knowledge? And then when I hit I believe I can do it, why is it so easy to turn around and be like, actually, it's not for me? And it's because of those things that are in our face. And I see it at a very young age, someone saying, oh, well, this isn't for you, or you have to have this to be able to be excellent. And then they stop. Why wouldn't you stop? And I mean, that's my lived experience with family. I see it with siblings where I'm like, you can be, not just because I could, but the resources possible for you as well. So, I really love that we keep coming back to the word education, because it's necessary to be able to let someone know that it is possible. Like, bump the big words, bump the extra terminology, right? Straight up. And this is what I have to give the flowers to Justin when it comes down to that. It was one of those like, yeah, you could do it. I did it. What do you mean? How do you do it? Like this.
Right.
That's it. Share the wealth, pass the book. That's how I feel about it.
I think something else that we're always going to run into, to kind of draw this back to this idea of like leading with humanity and the collective voice, is you don't know what you don't know. The only people who are going to tell you are the ones that have proximity to you, right? In this space, we do not often communicate across class lines. And when it comes to class disparities, you cannot even fathom what you don't know. So as I've found my, little success in my industry or whatever, I'm in meetings and I'm just like, oh, this is what's going on. Like there's and the magnitude of the money that's out there, the magnitude of the opportunity that's out there is unfathomable when you are coming from a place and you're performing for a drink at the bar, maybe like you get off work at 10 p.m. and ride over to the open mic. You can't even so it's like, not only do we have to educate, we also have to unlearn a lot of the stigmas that come with a lot of this stuff, because it's one thing. Yeah, it's like, it's tough because, we can preach all day, or we can tell people all day about all the opportunities, but they're going to have to go get it. And the barriers to the motivation to go get it come from a real place,
Very, very real place.
Well, how do we, so in that, right? So how do we motivate? How do we act as motivation for those, like, I'm real funny about when I talk about success, right? Because to me, success is, it is something that is not specific. We live in a society where success has equal Bentleys and Ferraris and large homes, right? For me, success, because everybody's definition will differ. For me, success is I don't get up and go to work 9 to 5 for anybody else. Now, do I get up in the morning? Absolutely. Do I work for me? Absolutely. Am I hustling and grinding all day? Absolutely. For some people, that's not success. Success is on a beach, not doing anything and just having their money work for them. Right. For others, success is being at work 24 hours a day, no days off. Right. For others, success is, Bentley und yacht und mansion und, private jet. For others, it's a hot meal. Right. Success is a hot meal and a roof and not having to worry about their bill for today. Right. And so I think that's the thing that we have to get into is when we're talking to others, when we're relaying to others, we could talk about access and equity and grants and grant funding and this, that, and the other. I think what it boils down to is what do we do as artists and institutions, educators? How do we show people or even just relay our success or what our definition of success is? Go for it.
I'm going to hop in real quick because I have just a quick thing to say. Then I'm going to pass it off. We communicate across these lines. Like we are working in our circles, which is important. So magnificent. There's so much that we can do together. But when we look at our differences, we can do two things at once. We can acknowledge the differences between our different communities while acknowledging that we are a global community. And if we go and communicate across these lines, we're going to have different, like, if you grow up where all of the people that are successful have certain things, you're going to think those are the things that are going to get, and then you go talk to them about the strategies to go get those things. All it takes is just to go talk to someone else with a completely different set of experiences. And that's going to contextualize what you have in common with both. Because I don't think it is like an either or. I think you can have a little bit of everything, and we have to communicate by leading. It sounds so broad, but when you lead with humanity, you're going to end up in spaces that you did not think was possible. There is no way that as a banjo playing old time guy, I thought I was going to be doing like mosh pit rap music because I thought that I was, like this thing. But when I led with the things that I have in common with all genres, I found myself in everyone, and we have to be the example. Us, those who know or like want to, we have to lead by example and do it.
So to your point, in my view is a little different only because it is the communication, but like as someone like who's moved across what I believe feels like class lines, even though I live one life, see another, it wasn't moving alone. And it also was not. It was the communication. I didn't have the problem with communication, but I'm thinking about those that didn't. So now that I'm in this situation, it's about helping someone deconstruct a fixed mindset. Fixed mindsets are things that hit you at a barrier and you're not able to move past it. A growth mindset allows you to move, allows you to breathe in a different way. But I've realized when I cultivate growth mindsets, they haven't been alone. Anytime that I've grown, it's been in pairs or groups. There has been individual benefit, but I've always been able to see once I reached out and up to a place that made me uncomfortable because I now have that skill set, because that's not a skill set everyone has, to be able to reach across their lines. They might not have that access either. I also have the understanding that I need to reach back and down into a community of people that will never have seen that, a place that I started, and say, we can do that. We are able to do it. You're going to do it, and I'll be right behind you. So, you know, those are, you know, that is the how for me. The how is helping people deconstruct that fixed mindset that you are not able to. It's the power of yet. You're not able to do it yet. You know, it helps you navigate, you know, where, or orient yourself in different ways. And Justin was saying earlier about how, you know, he saw himself one way. I mean, to my big thing now, which is teachers are artists, artists, teachers, music, art teachers are artists as well. That's not what we're told. Well, okay, well, I'm here to tell you that, period. You know, and then it's like, okay, but what do I do about it? Well, let me put you in a situation that gives you a professional development opportunity, but you're also creating art. Oh,
so you're talking about holding space. You're talking about holding space for folks and making sure that happens. So now to follow that up, and so do we save everybody? Do we take on the onus of saving everybody? Right? Because, you know, as human beings, we too need to be re-energized. And so how do we think about that? Do we think that our responsibility is to change everything at one time as us? Do we create or cultivate a whole space for that change to happen? How do we do that?
I don't think. Oh, I'm sorry, Jordan.
No, go for it.
You know, I don't think that everybody wants to be changed, and I don't think everybody wants to be saved. So that goes back to that listening part, right? Like, so listening, and if it does sound like a situation that Jordan's talking about, where it's a fixed mindset instead of a growth mindset, then it's up to us who are in these spaces, who know how to make things work, to say, have you thought about it like this? Because I look like you. I know what it's like, you know, to come from that background. I know, you know, all of these things. And I know how I've seen this work and breaking that down. But not everybody wants to hear that, right? Some people just, they want, you know, there's a thing called like the self-determination model, right? Where they don't want the help of the man, right? They don't want that grant. I'm not going to force a grant on anybody, right? Like, they may not want that. They may not want to do the paperwork. They may not want to deal. They may not want the money from the government. And that is completely fine. I'm not going to force that on anybody. Absolutely. But what I will do is, if there is somebody in a community, if there is an art and change maker that is in a community that wants that access, I will teach how the sausage is made. Right. So that they can then go to their community and teach others in their community how to make it happen. That to me is my obligation and my duty. Yeah. So I take that very seriously in the space in which I live, you know, that it is my job. I look at what I do as public service. It's a public service, and I take it very seriously as a woman of color, as a Black woman, that I am going to get out into these communities and let them know this is how you get this money. Now, they may not take that advice, and that is up to them, you know, but I at least am going to do my due diligence to say, I'm here to help. I am here to help. I will break it down. We will figure it out. And this is how you apply. This is what you do. And, you know, meeting people where they are, you know, and really cultivating that relationship so that there's trust there, because there has to be a certain amount of trust. And that goes back to Demeanor's point, that humanity point, right? In order to cultivate trust, you have to actually have meaningful connections with people and know where they're coming from and know what they want and what they need. And it may not be what you're giving. And that's okay too.
No, that's absolutely valid.
And that's exactly how I feel too. And I know that is something that has to be expanded into the question, which is like, if it's holding space, if it's not holding space, what is the other? So we talked about that, but in the spaces that are already holding space, deconstruct the things that are problematic. So like, schools are holding space already. Okay, well, create spaces where people can actually know what their resources are, instead of, oh, if you're not in an honors class, you're not able to have access to this knowledge. If you're in an AP class, you're not you don't experience the thing that these people, experience starting off the class system. That I think about that all the time as well. So, that the idea of providing that system or the ecosystem to what you were saying earlier, if we're going to hold space, are we supposed to save everyone? I don't think it's necessarily about that. I just, to everything we're saying about equity, I do believe if it starts on a level where the experiences can be equitable, then when we get to a place where people are making thoughtful choices and thoughtful only because they aren't rigid in their ways because of how life just treated them and also access they did not have. It's this was all your access and these were all your choices and you still chose to do whatever was best for you. Right. So, I love that. And it's definitely emerging between what both of y'all have said.
And Jordan, I did want to go back. No, I wanted to go back to what Jordan was talking about earlier. He stated that he was starting a festival. He didn't have all the information, right? And I think this can apply for all of us. We are not the first people to travel down these roads, right? And because we're not the first people to travel, well, some of us as artists take on this idea and understanding that nobody ever did this before me. We haven't done any due diligence. We ain't done no reading. We not looking. We just like, nope, I'm the first because I had an idea that may have existed out in this universe. No, I'm the first person to do it. And then I don't need no help. Let me just go down this road, right? And some of us understand and look around and be like, hold on, you know what? Somebody did this before. We might need to reach out and talk to them about it. I think that's another viable thing. Along with we can't save everybody. Everybody doesn't want to be saved. I don't think that we should also take on the burden of trying to create something that actually exists. We could take anything that already existed and reform it to fit what we're trying to do. But I don't think we need to, I think we don't need to make ourselves tired. I think at this point, though, unless you have something, Justin, that you wanted to add on, I think we should start moving on to questions. Giving people, I absolutely love this conversation. I think, Justin, I'm gonna let you wrap it up from what we were already talking about and then move on to question and answers from those who are listening to us. Thank you all. I appreciate you all and your perspectives.
Yeah, I think it's just like, I think we can do a whole bunch of things at once when we're all working together because we're all going to have different ideas. Because like I'm so in love with the idea of, you got to meet people where they are, and honestly, I think that sometimes we do have to reinvent the wheel because when you let 100 people reinvent the wheel, somebody's going to figure something out that nobody else did figure out. It's going to happen. Our ancestors did it. It's not like, nothing is new under the sun, but it's new to us. And I think that matters. And I think sometimes we have to have a little bit of ownership over an idea, especially as artists. Otherwise, I think people can feel differently. Yeah, and let's hop right into questions. I see one that's really...
Yeah, we had one from Kokayi, and she was basically asking us about our experience and perspectives of competition in the market, particularly between like Bandcamp versus Spotify conversations, something like that.
Yeah, I think that draws directly into what we were kind of already talking about, the difference between like Bandcamp and Spotify and these like DSPs and the industry, because like when we're talking about music, not once were we really talking about like the business side of things, we were talking about the soul. And so it's really difficult to merge the soul with business. And so I think that when it comes to competition in the market, it's like, you have to just decide what you're looking for as an artist. I got all the thousands of streams and it didn't feel as good as when I would do a show for 50 people and one kid came up to me and said that it meant something to him. I have friends that completely disagree, that do not care about the 50-person show, that only care when we're doing 20,000 people, So it just depends on what you want, but don't ever let that dictate your value because you're selling a product, on these platforms. You're selling a product.
Right. I look at it from the perspective as an artist. I totally agree, right? I think that you have to, as an artist coming into this business, it's the business of music, right? That's what it is. Music is something I love. The business of music is something I had to learn, right? And I think that's how you look at it. The understanding the business of music has kept me from ever falling out of love with music. Because I love music, I understand that this is a business model. I'm going to always enjoy music. I'm always going to do music. I'm always going to create. I'm always going to love that 50-person show. When you get into this business of music, you have to understand and figure out what success means to you personally.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I think that will keep you on your path. If success to you is 5 people singing your song back to you, that's a great success model. If it's 40 million streams and shows and sold out, that's a great success model. But you just got to define it for yourself.
And you got to know what you're getting into, because like if you think you're, I don't know. I feel a lot of ways about the music industry. I don't think anybody should participate in it. But if you want to, just know what you're getting into. Know yourself. Know yourself.
Listen, right. No, you have to know yourself. I think that's the thing. I love the music business. I don't care if it's signed, unsigned, independent, with a label. None of that matters to me because I understand it from a different perspective. I've been doing it for 26 years, Grammy nomination, all that hoo-ha. For me, it's about limelight versus real life. Right. Mm-hmm. The limelight is one thing. It's fake light. Right. Real life is real life. I understand who I am under the fake light. I understand who I am in real life.
And
speaking of
we look good
education,
in both.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Speaking of education, do you believe that there should be, management, entrepreneurship, or cultural management opportunities for young people? This came from somebody from Columbia.
Yeah, 150%. So the one of the most beautiful things that I'm thankful to participate in is what I was talking about earlier. So this national nonprofit Notes for Notes is building their first state-of-the-art recording production engineering program inside of a middle through high school. They have absolutely all access to it. They're going to learn all of the ins and outs, plus the industry things that come with the business side of music making, trained by industry professionals across the globe that will tune in and hone in on youth to be able to have access, to be able to make the choices that are necessary for them to reach their full potential. And so, yeah, it's extremely necessary because I won't say I would have changed what I did because I'm here now for a reason. But like, I preach it to the rooftops as an educator that is now seeing themselves as an artist, that is the only one right now that is playing with these tools as it's preparing for youth. It makes me happy too. Like it is personally like giving me what I need to be able to be the best version of myself in my personal music making, as me as an educator, as a community advocate, as a humanitarian, all of those things. And so, yeah, I think those resources younger gives people the access to not have to wait until they're 20 something, 30 something, 40 something to be able to know their worth. And I'm at the beginning of that journey. And so to hopefully be able to see a 12-year-old start where my 25-year-old journey is going to be absolutely amazing. I don't have words. I'm just here to demonstrate, so, I mean, tune in definitely to what that program, it's going to be at Penn Griffin School for the Arts in Greensboro, North Carolina. They're building this new program. So it's going to be amazing.
Speaking about worth, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, I will say, I just want to say, because so many of us missed the boat on that and didn't have a Jordan when we were coming up, teaching us these things. I do want to say that the North Carolina Arts Council, we don't just provide funding, but we also, my team provides workshops for working artists here in the state of North Carolina to talk about the business of being an artist, right? So as I said earlier, like how to negotiate, how to apply for grants, how to market yourself, all of these things. So I would definitely sign up, for our newsletter. We could probably drop the link in the chat because for those of us who aren't, so young anymore, and missed the boat on that. I know I didn't learn any of that when I went to school for music. Like I just learned about my craft. I didn't learn about how to actually live off of my craft, right? So that's oftentimes what's missed in our curriculum. So I'm really excited about Jordan's program, and because that means that there will be less of us learning this, as he said earlier, later on. But just want to make sure y'all know, if you're already an adult, you can still learn about
100%.
Yeah.
Savannah in North Carolina said, in addition to the class disparities, there's an impression that artwork has to be perfect to be worthy of an audience. What are the thoughts about work that's genuine or thoughtful and trying?
I think that's art.
Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah, I was about to say, I think that's art.
Yeah, absolutely. Do we think that folk artists are willing to share those resources? This is from Kyla, and that knowledge all of the time. So, meaning folks, artists that hold on to the information. Here's what I'm just gonna keep it a buck. There's the fear syndrome, right? The fear that somebody else is gonna come and take your grant or take your check or take whatever access that you have. Do we find that in the community? Are we still willing? Do folk artists or artists, period, willing to share the resources and that knowledge? Do you find that they want to share that knowledge all of the time?
So
that, in the communities that I'm in, I don't have any issue with that.
Yeah, that's a scarcity mentality.
Right. Gotcha.
And let me tell you, I work at the North Carolina Arts Council. We have money to give. Okay. Mm-hmm. So and this is the thing. If there aren't people applying for these grants and for funding, then the folks that are in power will say, oh, well, no one's applying for it. And then it looks like we don't need to give to that pot of money anymore. We'll go give to something else. Mm-hmm. And so it's really important to share that with your colleagues and with, you can't hold on to that information for yourself. You got to share the wealth in order for more of it to be there. So I think, that it's important for us to share with one another, especially within communities, on how we're doing these things, because then the folks that are providing those opportunities will provide more of those opportunities because there's more of a demand for it. But if there's no demand for it, well, then those opportunities, they shrink up. So it's really important to share.
I think it's also a great line, and kind of to what Savannah was saying in her question, which was about like my answer to her question was about people being a gatekeeper and not being that, and still being invitational in things that they themselves may not understand or feel as if it is beautiful, but it's still making an impact. Example of that is having a whole bunch of middle schoolers make an album, and it's like, you could tell they're kids, but like that was important to them. That made them happy. That made their parents happy. That could have made their friend happy. That is art, no matter what way we choose to share it. But in that same vein, when we are those same people that are what is actually excellent, what is good, what is bad, that's when we start holding on and the resources start shrinking up. I've seen on that end, it's those that are sharing are the ones that are entitled, but that also comes back to one of those things where it could be fear, but also I remember there was a time, because of my proximity to whiteness, that I felt like that's where I needed to look for success. Yet they didn't deem what I was doing as successful. But there were a group of people that looked like me that gave me that success, but I didn't have comfort. So that I think it's a mixture of all of those things kind of together.
And I think this kind of touches on another question that I see there, but funding and education doesn't just come from the government and academia. You know what I mean? Like,
yes,
there are a lot of ways that we can be creative and work together, and like the things that apply to one space don't apply to the other spaces. Like, I think the scarcity mentality makes a little bit of sense when a lot of people are being taken advantage of and don't have any ownership over their IP, and like it's a complicated thing. That's why I think we have to go different places. We have to look different places. There was a question earlier about like where you find, like, in schools, whether or not they have management courses, entrepreneurship courses, and stuff like that. Like YouTube University, that's a real thing. Like the internet, ask questions. I think whenever there's something like, you're not always going to find all of the answers in one place, and that's why I think it's important to be the example, no matter what space that you're in, because there's going to be somebody that relates to your story, whether or not they relate to your circumstances, and the questions that they might have for you, they wouldn't think to ask in another space.
Right.
When I was in school in conservatory mentality, there was nothing about being an independent artist that I even knew to ask. So even if there was a class there, I don't know if I would have pulled what I needed, because the rich kids who I was in class with didn't need the same answers that I needed. So we gotta diversify the way that we communicate, I think.
I definitely think,
and that question was about institutions that have fostered and perpetuated inequalities, right? Because we also know, and to your point, I think that's what happens, right? Is that as artists, because we live in underserved artists. So first we have to just break down what the situation is, because we already know that there's, art that is, seen through a Western lens, right?
Yes.
And when you don't look like the Western lens, then you are the underserved community. So just let's keep that point blank. And within that underserved community, there are institutions that uphold this Western thought, this Western idea of what art and arts practice and, what good and bad are based on Western ideals, right?
Yes.
And Western paradigms. Right. And so we are the underserved. So as the underserved, we then get fed information, to your point, Demeanor, we get fed information that makes us look in one direction. When you go to conservatory, that's all about Western thought, Western music, Western ideas. They go into Poulenc, they go into all the, the grand whoever composers or whatever, not one mention of any Asian composer, one African composer, any composers outside of Europe or that, that space or whatever. Right. So you're told to do one thing. And then when it comes time for funding as an independent artist, oh, you're an artist now. Okay, cool. Aside from going the record label route or doing it yourself, go to this institution. Well, what institution is that? Oh, the institution that still judges on these Western lines and these Western paradigms. So traditionally, we're taught to go through these spaces, right? So, and they foster and perpetuate this inequality, right? And so with that, why do we still continue to go to these structures? Do we think about going to these structures? Do we think about starting our own structure? That was that question. Go ahead.
There are these two models. There's the redistribution model that we talk about in funding, where we take the funds from the big, symphonies and opera companies and et cetera, and we distribute those to communities across the state or across the country that are not a part of those institutions. Then there's the self-determination model. That's the model that Demeanor is talking about, where it's like you don't have to go and get a grant. There are other ways to fund for your projects, right? I'm a believer that we have to have both, right? There is that gray area in there, right? So I believe, like, I feel a very personal calling in the work that I do at the North Carolina Arts Council, because I have the lens of being a woman of color from the South. I also went to conservatory, went to school for opera, where I was put into my head that this is how you sing. This is the technique. These white men who wrote this music forever ago is the right way to study. And now you're an official singer, right? But I remember I had one professor there. We have one Black professor on staff, Dr. Tammy Kernodle, and she taught like all the evolution of jazz and the music of the African diaspora and all of this stuff. I took all her classes, and she, to me, was a disruptor in that system. Me at the North Carolina Arts Council, I'm able to connect to people that haven't been connected to before. So it takes self-determination and figuring out how other ways to get funding, other ways to be supported. But it also takes, and this is not for everybody, but it also takes people who are willing to be a part of these institutions, because those institutions aren't going away anytime soon. Let's be real. They're going to be around for a long time. So we have to change them as the change on the outside is happening, And
when we're talking about these institutions, like, they're made up of people, to go back to your point, Carly, of like, you have to meet people where we're at. We all have to try. That's why I think it's so important that we all try every strategy, because you don't know what's going to work for you. And sometimes it takes being in an uncomfortable position to learn the right question to ask. When I was in, like, I will hold a fire under conservatories to the day I die, but I still took a lot from it. And I think that applies across the board. Like, we have to try everything. You got to try everything.
But that's why I feel the way I feel about the music business, right? I feel like if I have relationships and connections at labels, then I can ask these A&Rs who are people to think differently about how they treat the artists. When I meet artists that are signed, I'm like, don't pass on bad behavior. right? Just because you got jerked don't mean you got to jerk the next person. Make sure your contracts are solid. Control your own IP. How do you make sure you own your masters? I think there has to be disruptors in each of these situations. I think there's I think for me, OneBeat and Found Sound Nation is a disruptor in the traditional State Department model of send somebody to another country. Right? They're disrupting by saying, no, bring folks to here so we can all study music together and create this global community. Right? That's a disruption. I think you go into whatever space you're in and disrupt by being your authentic human self and not get caught up in the rhetoric or what is the traditional way that something is supposed to work. To your point, YouTube University has taught me a whole bunch, but also sitting at the feet of individuals that were willing to be like, nah, I'm not going to do that same thing. Right. Those people, those angels in disguise who were in and of and made of the fabric of that industry that I wanted to be in, also were humane enough to be like, I don't want to see you go down that road. My mentor, a jazz musician, was the first person that signed me up for publishing. He was like, yo, I need to make sure you don't get jerked on your publishing. And I was like, what? He was like, yeah, I could have taken it. Like he said it straight up. He was like, nah, I could have just took your pub. But I figured what would be best for you is to know how to set up your own publishing company, get introduced to a PRO, know what that all is, find out about it and move on. Like, so you don't hate me later in life. So I'm not the reason you're in therapy or the reason you hate music business, right? And from that, I was like, oh, this is how I should operate. And I think that happens one at a time, right? Yeah. So since this has been great. Love you all. I really appreciate you all for expanding on the ideas. Please, if you could, just give us final thoughts, and I will start with Jordan.
Cool. Well, my final thoughts on all of this are, if you want to create those situations and those spaces and those equitable opportunities, even us four sitting here, have to be the invitation point. As much as I believe that, people need that self-determination and those things, but we grow up in a system where we're not taught to have those. So I'm blessed that I was born with that drive, or I was put through the situations of my life to have that drive. But now we turn around and we give, and we all are. And just for anyone that's tuning in that doesn't think that they have the access to what Justin said, to what Carly said, we have access. It's about who you're willing to ask. And knowing that there are people that are just like you, like you are capable, and we can grow, and you do not have to move alone. So take from all of this, teacher our folk, teachers are artists,
right?
And push as hard as you can to break any fixed mindset that told you that you couldn't have something, so that you can be the best version of who you are.
And where can people find you on socials?
So people can find me at Mr. Lee Sings on Instagram and Facebook and YouTube. And I'll be doing all the updates of the projects that will be happening on those social media platforms. The Kobe Festival, you'll see information about that on my page. And that's Akobe Nexus, ACOBENEXUS. And that's how you can follow the festival as well.
Thank you. Carly, final thoughts.
Absolutely. So thank you all for having me today. This has been a really awesome discussion. My final thoughts are similar to what was said earlier, that, there are people behind these titles and these institutions. I'm one of them. Okay. And I think it's really important that we go out and get what is rightfully ours. If there are funders that are connected to your local or state or federal government, and you are, living here, that is rightfully yours to apply for. And so it is, and anyone who's working for any of those institutions is a public servant, and it is their job to make sure that you have access to it. So go ahead and meet that person. You're welcome to check out the North Carolina Arts Council's website at ncarts.org. Hit me up. I will put my email right there in the chat, because not my private one, but I will put my public one. and I also want to encourage you to contact. We have a folk life director, Zoe Van Buren. She is so dope, and she will walk you through anything that has to do. We have a really incredible folk life program. I really encourage you to check out what there is to offer. And if it's not for you, as I said earlier, that's cool too, but I think it's really important that we are not intimidated by these institutions and these barriers that have been set up. It is rightfully ours to apply for, and we need to support the creation of music and the creation of art and because we are the culture bearers, right? And that is what's really important. We must share that knowledge with one another. So I just want to encourage you. And the other thing is, if you're interested in arts administration, please, they're starting to, you can learn how to be an arts administrator and disrupt the system. If you feel like that's something that's within you, do that. Or at a university like, Jordan, or whatever, if you feel like that you can do that, I think it's really important that go ahead and do that, because there's not a lot of us on these sides, and it's important to have those perspectives in these institutions that we talk about. So go out there and get that and share it and continue to create. That's my parting words.
Thank you. You mentioned where your socials are, right?
No, social is Carly, Carly P. Jonesing. Carly P. Jonesing is all of my social. And then you can also find me, my professional me, on North Carolina Arts, ncarts.org.
Dope. Thank you. And last but not least, and congratulations on being on the OneBeat Podcast, Demeanor, closing thoughts.
If you are, this applies to anybody, but specifically, if you are an artist, if you are a creator and you are trying to figure it out, you can't tell what direction you want to go in, that's fine. You don't have to know right now. You're seen, you're heard, you're valued, you're loved, and you have a community of people. You just might not know them yet. Everybody that's on this panel, I didn't even know them a year ago, and we just had like the coolest conversation I've ever had. Like, you're gonna figure it out. And allow the universe to do a little bit of the work with you. You're not going to do everything yourself. The universe is going to have to work with you a little bit. Follow me on Instagram, DEMX Music, and check out my nonprofit, houseoflacks.org. That's HAUSOFLACKS. One Take Drake. Let's go.
That's right. One Take Drake. Thank you all once again for tuning in. Super shout out to Found Sound Nation, OneBeat, to Elena, to everybody that had us on, to Kokayi, and absolutely, I want to introduce and bring Elena onto the stage. And please tune in to the OneBeat podcast on all your streaming services and check out Demeanor's episode. And thank you all once again for being a great panel and for a lovely discussion. Turn it over to Elena.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm Elena from OneBeat and Found Sound Nation. I just wanted to hop on real quick to say this was deeply inspiring, deeply moving. I'm just like kind of over the moon about it. And it's going to be available if you want to check it out again. We'll have it up on our sites. I wanted to say, because we didn't introduce Kokayi before, Kokayi, DC-based multidisciplinary artist, producer, Grammy-nominated musician, preeminent improvisational vocalist, educator, storyteller, connector of dots, and it's been involved with OneBeat for a long time, and we're really appreciative of you stepping in and being part of this conversation. To Demeanor and to Carly and to Jordan, thank you so much for all of your thoughts and sharing with us, really getting to the how and to the why and to the humanity. We really appreciate that. And so OneBeat is a partnership with the U.S. Department of State. Shout out to that. And thanks to Ezra Tenenbaum for being behind the scenes of this live stream. Hey. And we really thank you all so much. Thanks for the conversation. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank
Peace
you.
Out. Be good.
All right.
One.
Take care.